Hi everyone. This is a lesson on chapter 39/52 of the book of Jeremiah. We will be coming back to the book of Jeremiah after a while, but here we'll leave it. Next week we'll go to Ezekiel. So for next week, read chapter 1 of the book of Ezekiel. And we're going to move from Judah, the setting will move into Babylon itself. And you're going to learn so much more about King Nebuchadnezzar than you ever hoped to learn. But here in chapter 39/52, we have the final days of Judah and the city of Jerusalem. Zedekiah is still the king. He's last king of Judah, of course, until Jesus Christ himself became the king of Judea and the rest of the world, and still king today. But Zedekiah, the evil king, was set up on the throne by the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. But he rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar, and that brought about the downfall of Jerusalem and Judah. Now Jeremiah had been warning about the fact that this was going to happen. And he kept asking and advising Zedekiah to throw himself on the mercy of Babylon, to surrender in order to save the city, to save the temple from being destroyed. And of course, Zedekiah's mind was set on victory, on overcoming the Babylonian army. So here we're going to read chapter 52, which goes into more detail about the fall of Jerusalem. Chapter 52. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 11 years. His mother's name was Hamutal, daughter of Jeremiah. She was from Libnah. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, just as Jehoiakim had done. It was because of the Lord's anger that all this happened to Jerusalem and Judah. And in the end, he thrust them from his presence. Now Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. So in the 9th year of Zedekiah's reign, on the 10th day of the 10th month, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, marched against Jerusalem with his whole army. They encamped outside the city and built siege works all around it. The city was kept under siege until the 11th year of King Zedekiah. By the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine in the city had become so severe that there was no food for the people to eat. Then the city wall was broken through, and the whole Judean army fled. They left the city at night through the gate between the two walls near the king's garden. Though the Babylonians were surrounding the city, they fled toward Arabah. But the Babylonian army pursued King Zedekiah and overtook him in the plains of Jericho. All his soldiers were separated from him and scattered, and he was captured. He was taken to the king of Babylon at Riblah in the land of Hamath, where he pronounced sentence on him. There at Riblah, the king of Babylon killed the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes. He also killed the officials of Judah. He put out Zedekiah's eyes, bound him with bronze shackles, and took him to Babylon, where he put him in prison till the day of his death. On the 10th day of the 5th month, in the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, Nebuzaradan, commander of the imperial guard who served the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem. He set fire to the temple of the Lord, the royal palace, all the houses of Jerusalem. Every important building he burned down. The whole Babylonian army, under the commander of the imperial guard, broke down all the walls around Jerusalem. Nebuzaradan, the the commander of the guard, carried into exile some of the poorest people and those who remained in the city, along with the rest of the craftsmen and those who had deserted to the king of Babylon. But Nebuzaradan left behind the rest of the poorest people of the land to work the vineyards and the fields. So there were actually three different periods of time that exiles were carried to Babylon. The first wave coming in 605 BC, when Daniel and Ezekiel and the other very knowledgeable, very bright young people were carried. And then later on, the last one here happens after Jerusalem was destroyed. The Babylonians broke up the bronze pillars, the movable stands, and the bronze sea that were at the temple of the Lord, and they carried all the bronze to Babylon. They also took away the pots, shovels, wick trimmers, sprinkling bowls, dishes, and all the bronze articles used in the temple service. The commander of the imperial guard took away the basins, censers, sprinkling bowls, pots, lampstands, dishes, and bowls used for drink offerings, all that were made of pure gold or silver. The bronze from the 2 pillars, the sea, the 12 bronze bulls under it, and the movable stands which King Solomon had made for the temple of the Lord was more than could be weighed. Each pillar was 18 cubits high and 12 cubits in circumference. Each was 4 fingers thick and hollow. The bronze capital on top of one pillar was 5 cubits high and was decorated with a network of pomegranates of bronze all around. The other pillar with the pomegranates was similar. There were 96 pomegranates on the side. The total number of pomegranates above the surrounding network was 100. Now, all of these articles had been built by Solomon's craftsmen many, many years before this, and the temple had stood for many years. But now the temple and all the articles in it are gone. You notice it doesn't say anything about the Ark of the Covenant, and this has caused much controversy. Tradition has it that Jeremiah himself got the Ark of the Covenant and carried it to safety. Jeremiah is left in the city after everyone had gone. He and some of the other folks that had been part of his network. But here, after the death of the governor, that was the assassination of the governor that was set up by the king of Babylon, Jeremiah and his comrades left and went to Egypt, and there they stayed for the rest of their years. Verse 24, the commander of the guard took as prisoners Sariah, chief priest, Zephaniah the priest next in rank, and the three doorkeepers. Of those still in the city, he took the officer in charge of the fighting men and 7 royal advisors. He also took the secretary, who was the chief officer in charge of conscripting the people of the Lord, 60 of whom were found in the city. Nebuzaradan, commander, took them all and brought them to the king of Babylon at Riblah. There at Riblah, in the land of Hamath, the king had them executed. So Judah went into captivity, away from her land. This is the number of people Nebuchadnezzar carried into exile. In the 7th year, 3,023 Jews. In Nebuchadnezzar's 18th year, 832 people from Jerusalem. And in his 23rd year, 745 Jews taken into exile by Nebuzaradan, commander of the imperial guard. There were 4,600 people in all. And this was supposedly the men. They counted the men. There would have been 15,000 to 20,000 people when you added the women and children. Then in verse 31, in the 37th year of the exile of Jehoiachin, king of Judah, in the year Awel Marduk, became king of Babylon, in the 25th day of the 12th month, he released Jehoiachin, king of Judah, and freed him from prison. He spoke kindly to him and gave him a seat of honor higher than those of the other kings who were with him in Babylon. So Jehoiachin put aside his prison clothes, and for the rest of his life ate regularly at the king's table. Day by day, the king of Babylon gave Jehoiachin a regular allowance until the day of his death. Now, looking at a couple of the questions that I put on your study sheet, one of them asks, what things did the Jews consider essential to their worship of God? And there are three main things that they considered essential. First of all, the temple. The temple is where God lived, at the mercy seat, inside the Holy of Holies. God was there. His spokesmen were his priests and his prophets, but God stayed in the temple. And there the people believed that until Ezekiel saw his glorious vision in the land of Babylon, which we'll be studying very shortly. Another thing they thought was very essential to their faith was the city of Jerusalem itself. Jerusalem was God's city, the city of David, God's beloved king, God's beloved city, God's beloved temple. He put his name, he put his mark, he put his seal of approval on the city of Jerusalem. And the Judeans thought Jerusalem would never be destroyed because it was God's city, and he wouldn't destroy his own city to make a point, to bring punishment on the people. Surely God would not allow himself to suffer that much. And the third thing was their ritual. They did the sacrificing, they did the cleansing, they did the fasting, and they thought that those rituals would save them from the anger that God would incur. But none of these saved the people of Judah. They didn't put their faith and trust in God himself. They put their faith and trust in objects, in ritual, and in other things besides God. And so what about the tenets of our faith? What do we hold dear? Are we like the Jews and we hold our church buildings as being the place where God lives, where we go each Sunday to meet God? Or do we find, like Ezekiel showed the people of Judah, that God is everywhere, that God is reaching out to us in love, he's reaching out with his mercy, and he's reaching us because he wants us to be his children in communion with God? And do we believe, like the Jews, that our ritual is an essential tenet of our faith? That if we don't have communion once a month, if we don't do things that we do in fellowship with each other, that will somehow disappoint God. Is God willing to suffer for us, to reach out to us in love and cause himself pain? Of course he is. After all, he allowed the sacrifice of his Son, Jesus Christ, so that we could live and know God's will and what is important. In these troubled times, and this time when we're apart, we can still hold each other in our heart and look to God for our relief, for our redemption. Let's take the lessons we learned in Jeremiah and let's put them in application to our own lives. Let's remember what's important. Let's always stay close to our Redeemer. Now blessings, peace, stay safe.